My heart was ripped apart in a single moment, torn to pieces by the son I raised. In my quiet Virginia home, where every corner holds memories of love and sacrifice, I heard his voice. James, my own flesh and blood, laughing like a coward through a phone he forgot to hang up. She's too stupid to realize what's really going on, he spat, venom dripping from every word. Lisa, his snake of a wife, cackled. She thinks she's saving us. Pathetic old fool. My hands shook. The teacup I clung to crashed to the floor, shattering like my trust. My kitchen, my sanctuary, turned into a prison of betrayal. My son, the boy I loved, the man I gave everything, my money, my home, my soul, stabbed me in the back. The pain? It's a fire that burns deeper than hell itself. But they didn't know I heard every word, and they'll pay for underestimating me. Stay with me, because this is the story of my rage and my revenge. I'm Eleanor, a 74-year-old widow, living alone in my old farmhouse on the edge of Warrenton, Virginia. My home's a cozy two-story with a wraparound porch, creaky hardwood floors, and rose bushes I've tended for decades. It's been 10 years since my husband George passed, leaving me with a nest egg from his pension and our careful investments. I poured my heart into keeping our family close, especially for my son, James, and his little boy, Tommy. James is 45, charming, with big dreams of making it big in business. His wife, Lisa, 42, always shows up with a warm smile and homemade pies, making me feel like the mother she never had. Tommy, my 4-year-old grandson, is my pride and joy, with his giggles lighting up this quiet house. Every Sunday they'd come over for dinner. James would fix my porch swing, joking, "Mom, you're gonna outlive us all in this old place." Lisa'd hug me tight, saying, "Eleanor, we're so lucky to have you." I believed them. I trusted them. After George died, I leaned on James like a lifeline. He'd call every week, bring groceries, and talk about his startup. "It's for Tommy's future," he'd say, eyes bright with ambition. I signed papers to help them buy a house, even co-signed loans for James's business, thinking I was building a legacy. My Chesapeake Bay cottage, where George and I spent our summers, was meant for Tommy someday. I never questioned their love until that phone call shattered everything. Now, I'm starting to see the cracks in their perfect act. The echo of James's cruel laughter still burned in my ears. His words, "She's too stupid to realize what's really going on," cutting deeper than any knife could. I sat frozen in my Warrenton kitchen, the phone still warm in my hand, the air thick with betrayal. My cozy farmhouse, with its rose bushes and creaky porch swing, felt like a stage where I'd played the fool. The teacup lay shattered on the floor, chamomile tea pooling across the hardwood, soaking into the rug I'd woven after George's death. My heart pounded, but my hands steadied. I wasn't ready to crumble, not yet. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I moved to my office, a small room off the kitchen where George used to balance our checkbooks. The oak desk was cluttered with photos of Tommy, my grandson, grinning in his little overalls. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing harshly in the dim light. James had set up my online banking last year, saying, "Mom, it's easier this way. You don't need to stress about the details." I'd trusted him, handed over passwords, signed forms without reading the fine print. Now, I logged into the accounts, my fingers trembling not with fear, but with a growing fury. The first screen showed our joint checking account, $12,000 gone in a single transfer last week, wired to an account labeled J.L. Ventures. My breath caught. That was James and Lisa's business. I clicked deeper, pulling up transaction histories. Withdrawals, one after another, some as small as $500, others as large as $20,000, all funneled to accounts I didn't recognize. My savings, built over 40 years with George, $200,000 from his pension, $150,000 from our real estate investments had been siphoned. I found a loan application, my name listed as guarantor, for a $300,000 line of credit I never approved. My pulse raced. "How could you, James? I whispered, my voice breaking in the silence. Smokey, my gray tabby, leapt onto the desk, her green eyes watching me like she knew something had shattered beyond the teacup. Then I saw a folder labeled Chesapeake Property. My heart sank. The cottage at Chesapeake Bay, where George and I watched sunsets, where I'd planned to take Tommy fishing someday, was tied to a real estate listing. An email from James to a broker read, "Mom won't notice. She's too wrapped up in family to check the paperwork. We can sell it for $450,000 cash out quick." Lisa's reply was colder. "Just keep her signing. She trusts us." I gripped the desk, my knuckles white. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my memories, my legacy, my love for Tommy. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal, a dagger through every moment I'd cherished with them. I opened another file, my hands moving faster now. The power of attorney document I'd signed 2 years ago stared back at me. James had said, "It's just for emergencies, Mom. You don't need to deal with the bank nonsense." I'd nodded, too eager to help, too trusting of his warm smile. That document gave him full control over my accounts, my investments, even the deed to my farmhouse. My name was on everything, but I was a puppet, and James held the strings. Lisa's role was clear now, too. Her sweet words, her pies, her hugs, all part of the act to keep me compliant. I stood, pacing the office, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The clock on the wall ticked louder, each second fueling my anger. I thought of Sunday dinners. James fixing the porch swing, Lisa's voice saying, "We're so lucky to have you, Eleanor." Lies. Every word, every smile, a calculated move to bleed me dry. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with a rage that felt alive, pulsing through me. I wasn't the pathetic old fool they thought. I was Eleanor, the woman who'd survived George's death, who'd built a life from nothing, who'd loved fiercely but not blindly. I sat back down, staring at the laptop screen. The evidence was overwhelming: bank statements, emails, contracts, all tying James and Lisa to a web of deceit. I saved every file to a secure drive. My hands steady now, my mind sharp. Smokey purred softly, curling up beside the keyboard. "They thought I'd never look," I said aloud, my voice low but firm. "They thought I'd stay in the dark forever." I closed the laptop, the click echoing like a gavel. The pain was still there, raw and searing, but it was transforming into something else: resolve. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. I'd make them face the truth, and it would hurt worse than any words they laughed behind my back. The truth clawed at my soul, sharper than any wound I'd ever known. I stood in my Warrenton farmhouse, the weight of James and Lisa's betrayal crushing me. Their words, "She's too stupid. Pathetic old fool," echoed relentlessly. But it was the discovery of their plan to sell my Chesapeake Bay cottage that broke me. That cottage wasn't just a house. It was where George and I danced under the stars, where we dreamed of growing old together, where I'd hoped to teach Tommy to skip stones across the water. Now, James and Lisa were stealing it, mocking me as they plotted to cash out my memories for $450,000. I sank into the armchair in my living room, the one George used to read his Sunday paper in, clutching a faded photo of us at the cottage. Tears burned my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall, not yet. I replayed every moment I'd trusted them. Sunday dinners when James would wink and say, "Mom, you're our rock." Lisa's soft voice as she handed me a slice of her pecan pie. "Eleanor, we'd be lost without you." Lies, all of it. I'd given them everything: $350,000 from my savings, my signature on their loans, even my peace of mind because I believed in their love. But they'd turned my trust into a weapon, wielding it to strip me bare. I walked to the fireplace, where a framed picture of James, Lisa, Tommy, and me stood on the mantel. We were smiling at Tommy's 3rd birthday, balloons floating behind us. I'd baked his cake that day, spent hours piping little blue stars for my grandson. Now, That memory felt like a cruel joke. My fingers traced the frame, then stopped. I couldn't bear to look at it. I moved to the kitchen, where the broken teacup still lay scattered across the floor, a mirror of my shattered faith. Smokey followed, her soft paws patting silently, sensing the storm inside me. I opened a drawer, pulling out a letter George wrote me years ago, his steady handwriting promising, "Eleanor, we'll always have each other, no matter what." I'd clung to that promise after he died, pouring my love into James, thinking he'd carry it forward for Tommy. But James wasn't the son I raised. He was a thief in my son's skin, and Lisa was his accomplice, her sweet smiles masking a heart as cold as winter. I pressed the letter to my chest, my breath hitching. The pain wasn't just betrayal, it was the death of the family I'd believed in. I felt hollow, like the wind could blow right through me. I stumbled to the porch, the night air cool against my face. The rose bushes I'd tended for decades swayed in the breeze, their thorns glinting under the moonlight. I thought of the day James moved into his new house, funded by my savings. He'd hugged me, saying, "Mom, this is for Tommy. You've given him a future." Lisa had nodded, her eyes misty. "We'll never forget this, Eleanor." I'd felt so proud, so needed. Now, those words twisted like a knife. They'd used Tommy as bait, knowing my love for him would blind me. I gripped the porch railing, my nails digging into the wood. The stars above Warrenton mocked me with their calm, reminding me of nights at the cottage when I still had hope. I sank onto the porch swing, its familiar creak a faint comfort. Smokey curled up beside me, her warmth grounding me as my mind spiraled. I saw every moment I'd ignored the signs, James's vague answers about his business, Lisa's quick subject changes when I asked about the cottage. I'd been too desperate to keep my family close, too scared of the loneliness George's death left behind. The pain was unbearable, a fire that consumed every memory of love I'd held dear. I whispered into the darkness, "How could you do this, James? How could you betray your own mother?" My voice broke, raw and ragged, as the weight of their deceit pressed down harder. But in that darkness, something stirred. Not tears, not surrender, but a spark small, fierce, unyielding. They thought I'd stay broken, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. I stood, wiping my face, my hands no longer trembling. The pain was still there, a wound that would never fully heal, but it was fuel now. I'd loved them too much to see the truth, but now my eyes were open. I'd make them face what they'd done, and I'd do it my way, calm, calculated, unstoppable. The pain was a wildfire, consuming every corner of my heart. But as I stood on my Warrenton porch that night, something shifted. The stars above didn't mock me anymore, they burned, sharp and clear, like a call to action. James and Lisa thought I was too weak to fight back, too old to see through their lies. They were wrong. I wasn't the pathetic old fool they laughed about on that phone call. I was Eleanor, the woman who'd rebuilt her life after George's death, who'd tended rose bushes through Virginia winters, who'd loved fiercely but not foolishly. The betrayal had broken me, but it also woke me up. I wouldn't let their deceit define me. I'd take back what was mine, not just my money, but my dignity. I returned to my office, the air heavy with the scent of old books and cedar. Smokey, my gray tabby, leapt onto the desk, her green eyes steady as I opened my laptop again. The screen still glowed with the damning evidence: $350,000 drained from my savings, a $450,000 listing for my Chesapeake Bay cottage, a power of attorney that handed James control. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman with a mission. I started downloading every document: bank statements, emails, loan agreements, saving them to a flash drive labeled Truth. My hands moved with purpose, no longer trembling. "They thought I'd never look," I muttered, my voice low but fierce. "They thought I'd stay asleep." I reached for the phone and dialed Mr. Harold Thompson, George's old lawyer in downtown Warrenton. It was late, but he answered, his voice gravelly but kind. "Eleanor, it's been a while. Everything okay?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "No, Harold. My son's been stealing from me. I need your help to stop it." There was a pause, then his tone sharpened. "Tell me everything." I laid it out: the transfers, the cottage, the power of attorney. Harold didn't interrupt, but I could hear his pen scratching notes. "You've got a case, Eleanor," he said finally. "We can revoke that power of attorney and freeze those accounts. But it'll get messy. Are you ready for that?" I gripped the phone, my resolve like steel. I've never been more ready. The next morning, I drove 10 miles to Warrenton's First National Bank, the same place George and I had opened our first savings account 40 years ago. The sun was high, glinting off the brick building, but my heart was a storm. Inside, I met with Mrs. Clara Evans, the branch manager, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes. "Mrs. Evans, I need to see every account with my name on it," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. She nodded, pulling up records on her computer. The numbers confirmed my worst fears. $75,000 more had been moved to James's business just last month. "I want these joint accounts frozen," I told her. "No access for James or Lisa. Not a cent." Clara raised an eyebrow but complied. "You're sure?" she asked. "Absolutely," I replied, my gaze locked on hers. "This is my money, my life." Back home, I sifted through George's old files, stored in a metal cabinet in the office. His meticulous notes, every receipt, every contract reminded me of his mantra. "Eleanor, never sign what you don't understand." I'd ignored that wisdom, blinded by love for James. Now I found a copy of the deed to the Chesapeake cottage, still in my name alone. James hadn't dared transfer it yet, but he'd planned to. I clutched the deed, my fingers tracing George's signature. "I'm sorry, George," I whispered. "I let you down, but I won't let them win." Smokey curled up beside me as I organized my evidence-printed emails, bank records, the power of attorney form. Each page was a brick in the wall I was building, a fortress to protect what was left of my legacy. I thought of Tommy, my grandson, playing in the yard, unaware of his parents' greed. This wasn't just for me, it was for him, to ensure he'd have something real someday, not a future built on lies. My anger had cooled into something sharper, colder, more dangerous. James and Lisa had counted on my silence, my trust, my age. They'd underestimated me, and that was their fatal mistake. I closed the file cabinet, the metallic clang echoing in the quiet house. The porch swing creaked outside, a reminder of the life I'd fought for. I wasn't done yet. Harold had promised to draft revocation papers by tomorrow. The bank was locking down my accounts. The truth was on my side, and I'd wield it like a blade. James and Lisa thought they could laugh behind my back. Soon, they'd face me head-on, and I'd be ready. The fire of my resolve burned hotter than ever as I stood in my Warrenton farmhouse, ready to face the storm I'd set in motion. James and Lisa thought they could laugh behind my back, siphon my life savings, and sell my Chesapeake Bay cottage without consequence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I'd spent days gathering evidence: $350,000 in unauthorized transfers, a $450,000 listing for my cottage, a power of attorney they'd twisted into a weapon. With Harold Thompson, my lawyer, by my side, I was no longer the trusting mother they'd mocked. I was Eleanor, and I was taking back my life. I invited James and Lisa to my home under the guise of a routine Sunday dinner. The dining room table was set with my best china, a deliberate echo of the family meals they'd used to manipulate me. Smokey, my gray tabby, watched from the windowsill, her green eyes glinting like she knew what was coming. Harold arrived early, his briefcase heavy with legal documents, his face calm but resolute. "You sure about this, Eleanor?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "They'll try to guilt you." I nodded, my voice steady. "Let them try. I'm done being their fool." When James and Lisa walked in, their smiles were as polished as ever. James carried a bottle of wine, saying, "Mom, thought we'd celebrate Tommy's preschool graduation." Lisa chimed in, her voice syrupy. "You're gonna love his little diploma, Eleanor." I forced a smile, gesturing to the table. "Sit, please. We have a lot to discuss." They exchanged a glance, sensing something off but not yet alarmed. Harold sat across from them, his presence a silent warning. The air grew thick, the ticking of the grandfather clock slicing through the tension. I didn't waste time. "I know what you've done," I said, my voice low but cutting. "The transfers, the loans, the plan to sell my Chesapeake cottage. I found every email, every document." James's smile faltered, his hand tightening around his wineglass. "Mom, what are you talking about?" he said, laughing nervously. "We're family. You know we'd never—" I cut him off, sliding a stack of printed bank statements across the table. $350,000 from my savings. $75,000 last month alone. My name on loans I never approved. You called me stupid, James. You and Lisa laughed about it. Oh, one. Lisa's face paled, but she leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Eleanor, you're blowing this out of proportion. We were building a future for Tommy." I met her eyes, unflinching. "Don't you dare use my grandson to justify your theft." James slammed his hand on the table, the china rattling. "You're ruining everything, Mom. We're a team. You can't just—" Harold raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "You're mistaken, Mr. Carter. Eleanor has revoked your power of attorney. The joint accounts are frozen. The bank and the state are reviewing your actions for financial elder abuse." The room went silent, the weight of Harold's words crushing their facade. James's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to Lisa, who gripped his arm, whispering, "Do something." But there was nothing to do. I leaned forward, my voice cold as ice. "You built your dreams on my trust, James. You mocked me, thinking I'd never see. But I see everything now, and I'm taking it all back." Lisa tried one last plea, her voice trembling. "Eleanor, please. Think about Tommy. We're family." I stood towering over them despite my age. "Family respects. You stole. You're not my family. You're thieves." They stormed out, James muttering threats under his breath, Lisa's heels clicking furiously on the hardwood. I didn't flinch. The door slammed, and Smokey leapt onto the table, purring softly, as if to say, "You did it." Harold gathered his papers, nodding approvingly. "You were strong, Eleanor. They didn't expect that." I looked at the photo on the mantel, James, Lisa, Tommy, and me, and turned it face down. The pain still lingered, but it was no longer a cage. I'd broken free, and this was only the beginning. They'd soon feel the full weight of their betrayal, and I'd be the one pulling the strings. The air in my Warrenton farmhouse felt lighter after James and Lisa stormed out, their lies exposed in the dining room confrontation. I'd faced them head-on, my voice steady, my evidence undeniable, $350,000 siphoned from my savings. A $450,000 plan to sell my Chesapeake Bay cottage, a power of attorney twisted against me. They thought they could guilt me into submission, but I was no longer their pathetic old fool. I was Eleanor, and the storm I'd unleashed was just beginning to break. Smokey, my gray tabby, curled up on the armchair, her steady purr a quiet anchor as I prepared for the fallout. James and Lisa hadn't seen the full weight of their betrayal yet, but the cracks in their world were spreading fast. 2 days later, the first blow landed. James's startup, J.L. Ventures, crumbled under the weight of his own greed. I'd tipped off Harold Thompson, who'd alerted the bank to audit the accounts tied to my name. The bank's investigation uncovered $500,000 in questionable transfers, triggering a freeze on all of James's business funds. His investors, a group of wealthy Richmond entrepreneurs, caught wind of the probe and pulled out overnight, spooked by whispers of fraud. I didn't need to be there to imagine James's panic, his polished charm dissolving as his phone buzzed with angry voicemails. "You lied about the collateral," one investor barked, his message left on James's voicemail, which Harold later obtained. "Your mother's name was all over it." "We're done," Lisa broke first, her carefully curated facade shattering like the teacup I'd dropped that fateful night. She called me at dawn, her voice trembling through my answering machine. "Eleanor, please, you've got to stop this. The bank's frozen everything, our savings, our mortgage, even Tommy's college fund. We're losing the house." Her words dripped with desperation, but I felt no pity. She'd called me a fool, laughed as they planned to sell my cottage. I saved her message, adding it to the growing file of evidence Harold was compiling for the state. "They're not family, Smokey," I said, stroking her fur as she lounged on my desk. "They're consequences." The scandal spread like wildfire through Warrenton's tight-knit community. A local reporter, Sarah Mitchell, caught wind of the bank's investigation and dug deeper. Her article in the Warrenton Times hit the stands 3 days after the confrontation, its headline screaming, "Local entrepreneur faces fraud probe over mother's finances." The story detailed the unauthorized transfers, the cottage listing, and my name as the unwitting guarantor. Neighbors whispered at the grocery store, their glances shifting from sympathy to outrage. Mrs. Jenkins, my bridge partner, called to say, "Eleanor, I had no idea they were using you like that. You're stronger than any of us knew." I smiled faintly, clutching the phone. "I'm just getting started." James tried to salvage his reputation, posting a frantic statement on social media. "This is a misunderstanding. My mother's confused, and we're working it out as a family." But the evidence was ironclad, and the town wasn't buying it. Lisa's family, the Harrisons, distanced themselves, issuing a cold statement through their lawyer. "We're shocked by these allegations and support a full investigation." The hypocrisy stung. Lisa's mother had praised James's ambition at every Sunday dinner. Now, they were abandoning ship, leaving James and Lisa to drown in the mess they'd made. I sat on my porch swing that evening, the creak of the chains a steady rhythm against the Virginia dusk. The rose bushes glowed under the fading light, a reminder of the life I'd built with George. I'd protected Tommy's future by locking the cottage in a trust, but James and Lisa's world was unraveling. Their mortgage payments stalled, their credit cards declined at the gas station, their perfect life exposed as a house of cards. I didn't revel in their downfall, but I felt no guilt either. They'd chosen this path when they laughed behind my back, thinking I'd never fight back. Harold called that night, his voice brisk. "The state's expediting the elder abuse investigation, Eleanor. Your evidence is airtight, those emails, the voicemails, the bank records. They're facing serious charges." I nodded, staring at the stars. "Good," I said softly. "Let them face what they've done." The pain of their betrayal still lingered, but it no longer held me captive. I'd taken the first step in the dining room, but now the world was seeing their true colors, and I wasn't done yet. There was still one final move to secure my legacy forever. The storm I'd unleashed on James and Lisa had torn through their carefully constructed lies, leaving their world in ruins. The Warrenton Times headline, the frozen accounts, the investors' retreat, it was all proof that their betrayal had consequences. But I, Eleanor, wasn't done. In my Warrenton farmhouse, surrounded by rose bushes and memories of George, I was ready to cement my victory, to reclaim not just my money but my dignity. Smokey, my gray tabby, lounged on the windowsill, her steady gaze a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. The pain of James's words, "She's too stupid," still stung, but it no longer held me captive. I'd broken free, and now I'd make sure my legacy was untouchable. I met Harold Thompson at his office, a modest brick building 5 miles from my home. The air smelled of old paper and coffee as he spread out a stack of legal documents. "Eleanor, you've done everything right," he said, his voice steady. "The power of attorney is revoked, the accounts are frozen, and the state's building a case for elder financial abuse. but we need to lock in your assets. I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. I want Tommy protected, I said. The Chesapeake cottage, my savings, everything I've got left is for him, not them. Harold pushed a trust agreement across the desk. This puts the cottage and $200,000 of your remaining savings into a trust for Tommy, accessible when he's 21. James and Lisa can't touch it. I signed without hesitation, my pen steady, each stroke a declaration of my strength. Back home, I sat at George's old desk, the one where he'd taught me to balance our checkbooks decades ago. I pulled out my will, its pages yellowed but clear. James's name was everywhere, beneficiary of my $150,000 retirement fund, co-owner of the farmhouse, heir to my life's work. My heart tightened, remembering the boy who'd once run through my rose bushes laughing. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd called me a fool. I took a black pen and crossed out his name line by line, my hand unwavering. Not anymore, I whispered, Smokey purring softly beside me. The new will, drafted with Harold, left everything to Tommy's trust, with a small fund for local charities. James and Lisa would inherit nothing but the consequences of their greed. The next day, I drove 20 miles to the county recorder's office to file the trust and deed transfer for the Chesapeake cottage. The clerk, a young woman named Emily, smiled as she stamped the papers. "This is airtight, Mrs. Carter," she said. "No one can challenge it without your consent." I thanked her, feeling a weight lift. The cottage, where George and I had watched sunsets over the bay, was safe for Tommy. I could almost hear George's voice teasing, "You've got this, Eleanor. You always did." I smiled, the first real smile in weeks, as I walked back to my car, the Virginia sun warm on my face. Meanwhile, James and Lisa's world continued to collapse. Harold had sent cease and desist letters to their bank, blocking any further attempts to access my accounts. The state's investigation was gaining traction, with a hearing scheduled to review charges of financial elder abuse. A voicemail from Lisa arrived that evening, her voice cracking. "Eleanor, please, we're losing everything. The house, our business, think of Tommy." I deleted it without replying. She'd used Tommy as bait before, and I wouldn't fall for it again. The Warrenton Times ran a follow-up story, quoting an anonymous neighbor. "We thought James was a family man. Turns out, he was just a con." The shame was theirs, not mine. I stood in my garden that evening, pruning my rose bushes under the golden light of dusk. Each snip of the shears felt like cutting away the last threads of their betrayal. The farmhouse, once a stage for their lies, was mine again, every creaky floorboard, every blooming rose. I'd protected Tommy's future, secured my legacy, and restored my dignity. But I knew James and Lisa wouldn't stop. They'd try to fight back, to spin their story, to guilt me one last time. I was ready. With Harold's papers filed and the town behind me, I'd face their final push with the same strength that had carried me this far. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one I'd write on my terms. The dust had settled in my Warrenton farmhouse, but the echoes of my fight lingered. James and Lisa's betrayal, $350,000 stolen, my Chesapeake Bay cottage nearly sold, their cruel words calling me a fool had nearly broken me. Yet here I stood, stronger than ever, my dignity restored. The state's investigation was closing in. The cottage and $200,000 were safe in a trust for Tommy, and my will was rewritten to protect my grandson's future. The rose bushes outside my window bloomed brighter, as if they knew I'd reclaimed my life. Smokey, my gray tabby, curled up on the porch swing, her steady purr a reminder that I'd found peace in the wreckage. I walked through my home, touching the familiar George's armchair, the creaky floorboards, the photo of Tommy I'd kept upright. This farmhouse wasn't just a house. It was my story, built with love, loss, and now, triumph. I'd learned hard lessons from James and Lisa's deceit. Trust is precious, but it must be earned, not given blindly. At 74, I thought love meant saying yes to family, signing papers, giving everything. I was wrong. Love means setting boundaries, protecting your worth, even when it hurts. I'd let their lies blind me, but never again. My eyes were open, and my heart was my own. For anyone listening, especially those who felt the sting of betrayal, here's what I've learned. First, check your finances, every account, every signature. Don't let trust cloud your judgment. I found $500,000 in unauthorized transfers because I looked. Second, set boundaries, even with family. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your security. Third, seek help. My lawyer, Harold Thompson, was my lifeline. Find someone you trust, a professional, not just a loved one, to guide you. These lessons saved me, and they can save you too. I stood on my porch, the Virginia dusk painting the sky in gold and pink. The stars were emerging, just like the strength I'd found within. James and Lisa thought they could take everything, but they didn't know me, not the real Eleanor, the woman who'd survived loss and rebuilt herself. I'd fought for my legacy, for Tommy, for the life George and I built, and I'd won. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt used or betrayed, please share your thoughts below. Your story matters, and it might help someone else find their strength. Give this video a like if it moved you, and consider subscribing to the Unwanted Revenge to hear more stories of resilience. We're stronger together, and no one should fight alone. Let's keep standing up, keep shining no matter what.